Marshall, did you get in there? You got into the sanctuary?
Yeah, one let me in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Making sure.
Yep. So this morning, the Consul General does not use electricity?
He does not. Feel
Even
free
with Makshi I couldn't hear him.
Yep. Yep.
I wonder if this will help me to be Shobayat Tefillah, we'll see.
It was quite difficult.
Yeah. My wife asked me, what did he say? I said, I may have heard 1/3.
Yeah.
When he turned towards my direction.
Right. Yep. It better than not having him at all, but still confounding for people. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But still confounding. Yeah.
Really? Yep.
Hi. Thank you.
Hi, Judy. Good to see you. Shabbat shalom. Diane, Shabbat shalom. Good to see you.
You know what I think?
No. Judy, I missed you on Friday morning at the gym.
I know. Oh, the gym. What's very busy, yeah. You guys hang out at the same gym? Yeah.
Yeah. Judy is there every morning. Almost. Yeah, I'm getting a little bit earlier, right? Because I sometimes have to pick up the boys, so I have to get in and out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You could also use that one. You can use that one also, isn't it? Oh, yeah.
Remember when we were still calling pages on a 3-seater ream? Not that long ago. You could be using any seat order in the world, and we would call the page numbers for it. That was like 2.5 years. I guess you could probably still announce all those page numbers from all the different seater ream, I would bet.
Pretty amazing.
Thank you much, Lou.
Counting on you to call up.
Speaking of the devil,
Right.
talking about your remarkable facility for memorizing page numbers in 20 different sitters.
Thanks.
And I was remembering how happy I am not to be announcing pages from 3 different seater ream.
Great.
Actually, I think it was 3.5 years we did it.
Great.
It's a long time.
Yeah, because people on Zoom who were more comfortable Zooming than coming in person. If you didn't have to like Shalem.
Exactly.
I just use it so that it will be easier to get in. Sure.
Always fun to read.
Yeah.
No.
Shalom. You can do that.
This one.
Yeah, my colleague told you if you can lead anything. My colleague told you if you can lead anything. Okay.
No problem.
Okay.
Just gonna say so. I'm gonna go to the old kid.
Oh, thank you.
Isaac, my wife has asked me to clear out my bookshelf, and I found there a Russian language Siddur and Mansur. Would you be interested in having it? You already have it?
Yes.
It was like a second,
I thought that was here tonight.
to make my wife happy.
I offer you books, Hebrew, you said
It's
you don't
perfect
need
after
it.
party.
Yeah, my wife says, clear off those shelves, clear off the shelves.
Yeah.
I did
Just
same
got
thing,
water.
and finally, Michael took to Israel for his son. It was very good book you decided to pass on. But anyway, try Chabad on
Santa
Santa
Monica.
Monica.
Yeah.
Maybe. Nobody takes books these days.
Yeah,
Nobody.
it's true, yeah. It's
Nobody.
very hard.
I had the books. I tried to clean my bookshelf. I went downtown Central Library. I went over to branches. I went to Lake County Library. Nobody wants to touch books.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Reverend Turner, would you like to have Russian language Mansur and Russian language Siddur for your own collection?
The
Russian first. No, it's
the
in
number
Russian.
of people, I think if Susan had $10 for every time somebody called the synagogue and said, hello, I'm cleaning out, insert here, my garage, my brother's place, my parents' place, would you like between 1 and 8 boxes of books? Usually though, they're not like Sifrei Kodesh, they're not like Machzorim and Sidurim, usually it's the other stuff, the stuff that's in the bottom right hand corner there, at Abba Eben and sometimes dictionaries, like that kind of thing. Yeah.
I'll even throw in 3 versions of the Silverman High Holiday Mansur.
Sure.
As a bonus.
I would take. Oh no, I already have one. Never mind. I already have one. I have one.
Maple locks maybe work better.
That was the first one that I ever. That was the one I used while I was in cantorial school. So I have one, and it's all marked up. There are a few I don't have though. Trying to think of. There are a couple Machzorim I don't yet have on my shelf. So keep
I
trying.
have the burn
Yeah,
on,
okay.
I don't know that I have Birnbaum. I don't have Boxer.
I have like a mitzvah in all the states already a long past, it's moved too many years.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We use that bump, I've not, my sister I think has it, I've not had the heart to throw it out.
It makes sense. I mean, in a lot of families, not just Jewish, I mean, not just non-Jewish families, they'll use it as a kind of ledger for family simchas and that kind of thing. They'll like write all the
Yeah.
births and deaths in there.
Number 10, minion maker.
Bob's also there.
Bob's also in there. He can get credit.
How you lined up with this nobody at your home?
How did I end up with it? When the Russian Jews started coming in, we befriended a family, Leonia Shkrab and his wife Svetlana and daughter Vika. And because I spoke some Russian at that time, he gave it to me as a gift.
You mean Jews, Russian-speaking Jews, not Russian Jews.
Russian-speaking Jew. Oh, no, he's
Jews, not Russian Jews.
right.
Jews.
Jews,
Russian-speaking.
Russian-speaking Jews, right?
Yeah, it's
Big difference.
Yeah, right.
We spoke Yiddish.
Why we need Russian ahead of Jews? Doesn't make sense.
Right, that's a good point.
All right, well, we have a minion, so we'll start. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. We're going to begin on page 214.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Gary. Hi, Tybal. Hi, iPhone, obviously. Hello to
The wind blew in.
another country. From, okay, 214. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד ידללוך סלע, השם שלך חלו, אשרי עם אשר אדוני אלוהיו תהילה ודוד. Tfilat Adonai daber pi, v'varech kol asar shem koshol le'olam v'hed, v'anachnu nevarech yam et aviad olam hallelujah, u'v'atzihu l'shavifesh Rabbi Yaakov Ne'eman. V'takadosh Shevti Lot Yisrael, v'karazel zev yamar, kadosh 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 Adonai tzvaot, meloch ha'aretz kevodo, galin t'midim. V'tisaini ruach v'shma acharai kol rash gadol, baruch kivod Adonai mi mekomo u'talad Yaakov. Adonai himloch le'olam v'hed, Adonai malchutecha. Yivtechu v'chayurei shemecha, ki lo azavta doreshecha Adonai, Adonai chafetz l'man ziko, yagdil Torah v'yadir, yigatav yikadash shemei rabah, yamad divrach yirtei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayichon, v'yomechon, v'chayiducho beit Yisrael, v'akalav izman kariv, v'imru amen, yehi shemei rabah mevarach, le'elam olamei amayat, Yibarach v'yishtabach v'yibar v'yishma v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitolei v'yitolal shmei d'kudusha v'richu le'ila min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata Kamiram milma v'imru amen. We rise on 2:18. V'ani tefilati l'chadonai yitraton l'limerov chastecha enini v'emet yishecha V'yehi b'to Aaron v'yomer Moshe kum Adonai v'yavuto yivecha Yanusu v'sanecha v'yipanecha Ki mitzion tetzei Torah v'Adonai v'Yerushalayim Baruch shenatan Torah l'Amo Yisrael B'ikti Yushato. You don't have to no more. Oh, it is turned around. Yeah, let's flip the table around. Yeah, you were just talking about going to the gym. You want my
Yes.
yeah, if you come get the other end, that'd be great. So I'm not doing it with a Torah. And also, you can stay up here and gabbai for me. Thank you for noticing that. I did not. Okay. Pekuda, yeah.
This afternoon's Torah reading can be found in your Eitz Chaim Chumash on page 564, Parshat Pekudei. For those of you at home following along from a different Chumash or Tanakh, open to Exodus chapter 38, verse 21. 564.
A lot of ayasas. There we go.
Got it.
Joe, I'm going to trade sides with you, if that's okay? Great.
Here's the.
Oh, I have also, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Anybody have any special occasions this week? Yes, no? Nothing. Anyone have any special occasions last week? Oh, what an uneventful March so far. Is there anybody who would really like to take an Aliyah this week? In the mood to? Okay, then I'm going to honor some. Diane, will you please join us and take an Aliyah? Or you can I trade you for addressing the Torah instead? Okay, great. Judy, can I offer you an Aliyah? Okay, great. This is why I don't like to pick on people. Okay, we'll start in just a moment. If you're in the Eitz Chaim, we're on page 564. If you're in the back of the weekday Sim Shalom, which has the weekday breakdown, we're on page 286.
Joey, did I steal your seat?
No, you're good.
V'tigalei v'terei malchutolei b'zman karov v'chol pleitatenu pleitata beit Yisrael lechenu chasurach mirosov nomar amen hakol havu godel elahinu nu chavod laTorah ta'amod.
Yehudit,
Yehudit.
Bat Akiva HaKohen B'Saracha.
Oh, Badakiva Kohen Basaracha Lalia Rishona Baruch Shatan Torah Lemo Yisrael Viktushato. V'yatam Rekim Adonai Lechem Chayim Kulechem Hayom. Nice to have a Bat Kohen up here.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vayed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vayed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Ele fikudei hamishkan mishkan ho'edut asher pukad al pi Moshe avodat haleviim biadi Tamar ben Aharon hakohen uvtzalel ben Uri ben Hur lemate Yehuda asa ed kol asher tziva Adonai et Moshe v'ito Aholiah ben Achisamach lemate Dan Choresh v'Choshe v'Rokem Vatchelet uva Argaman utolat Hashani uva Shesh Charash v'Choshev.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chai olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Okay, Yamod. Michael Ze'ev ben David Udvora Aliyah Hashniha. Second Aliyah.
Page 564, verse 24.
Baruch Adonai Barach.
Baruch Tien.
Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Kol hazahav ha'asui lamlacha b'chol melechet hakodesh v'hi zahav hatanufa tesha v'yasrim kikar u'shva meot u'shloshim shekel b'shekel hakodesh v'chesef pekudei ho'eda me'at kikar v'yelef u'shva meot v'chamisha v'shivim shekel b'shekel hakodesh Beka lagilgolet, machatzit hashekel b'shekel hakodesh l'chol ha'over ala pegudim. V'ven esrim shana v'mala l'sheish meyot elef l'shloshet alafim v'chamesh meyot v'chamishim. V'hi me'at kikar ha'kesef latzeket ed adnei hakodesh v'ed adnei habarochet me'at adani limat ha'kikar kikar la'aden.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Take a note slightly.
Yisher Koach. Yamod.
Lor Yisrael,
Lor Yisrael.
Ben Nachum Yehuda Tzvi,
Ben Nachum Yehuda Tzvi.
Rachel.
Rachel. Aliyah Hashlishit. We're up to verse 28.
Baruch Hu Es Adonai Mevorach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam.
Baruch Adonai Mevorach Leolam V'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'nasan lanu es Torah. So Baruch atah Adonai nosin haTorah.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. V'yeta elef u'shva me'ot chamisha v'shivim asav avim le'amudim v'tzipar rashahem v'chishak otam u'nechosha hatnufa shivim kikar v'yalpayim v'yarba me'ot shekel v'yalpayim v'yarba me'ot shakel v'yasba Adonai petach ohel moed v'yet mizbach hanechoshet v'yet michbar hanechoshet asher lo v'yet kol klei hamizbeach v'yet adnei hechatzer saviv v'yet adnei shar hechatzer v'yet kol yitot hamishkan v'yet kol yitot hechatzer saviv u'minat techelet v'ha'argaman v'tolat hashani asu v'gdei serad l'sharet ba'kodesh v'ya'asu et b'gdei ha'kodesh asher li'aharon ka'asher tziva Adonai et Moshe.
Yisher Koach.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher nasan lanu Torah emet v'chei olam v'tapisuchenu. Baruch atah Adonai nosin haTorah.
Amen. Of course it is.
Amen. It's weirdly large though. Joy, will you lift the Torah as long as you're up here? Okay. Yamod Hamagdia. Please rise as we lift favorite Torah. V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai v'yad Moshe Yitzayim b'lama chazikim ba v'tomim ve'hamekushar Yitzayim b'lama chazikim ba v'tomim ve'hamekushar Does anybody in this room have a yard site to be acknowledged this week with an Almale? No, wow. Okay, anybody on Zoom? Tybal, Brant, Gary. Okay, then we'll continue with this service. Give me 1 second, Joey, I'm going to turn the page. We're on page 221 as we prepare to return the Torah to the Ark. I'll take it, thank you. Hallelujah, Shema Adonai, Kiniska, Shemo Levado, Hodol Eretz V'Shamayim, V'Erim Karen Le'am Bal, Tila D'Chol Chasita, Leave Neis Olam Krovo. Hallelujah. Niza melech hakavod Adonai tzvot melech hakavod seva uvnucho yom har Shabbat Adonai v'vot. Hashivin Adonai lecha v'nashuva chadesh yameinu kekedem. We continue in the middle of page 222 with Chatzi Kaddish. That will be followed by the whispered private Amidah for Shabbat Mincha on the following page. Right now we're on 222. Yikatav yikadash mirabav yamadira kirutivim lichmachutei b'chaychon v'yomechon v'reit v'chol beit Yisrael bagalav v'zman kariv v'imru amein yehish mirabav v'varach le'olam u'me'omaya yiparach v'shabach Yitpar v'yitramah v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalal shemei kudusha v'rich u'le'ela minko berchata v'shirat hadush b'chata v'nechamata damir amelma v'imru amein. you haven't yet completed your own private Amidah, please continue at your own pace. In just a moment, we'll be on page 223 for the repetition of the Amidah. You can remain standing through 225 if you're able, and then be seated at the end of the Kedusha with the blessing Ha'el HaKadosh. Again, we're on 223. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu Eloi Avraham Eloi Yitzchak Eloi Yaakov Eloi Sarah Eloi Rivka Eloi Rachel Eloi Leah Hayel HaGadol HaGibor VaNorah Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol V'Zocher Chasdei Havod Mevigo Eliv Nivnei L'man Shemo B'Yahava Melchozer Foked Moshiach U'Magin Baruch atah Adonai Magin Avraham U'Foked Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayim Mitim Atah Rav Le'Shia Mashiva Ruach U'Morida Kashem Mechal Kechayim בחסד, וחיים מיתים רחמים רבים, סמך נופלים ורפא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר מלחמה קבל גברות. ומידום מלך מלך במית ומחיי, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה וחיי ותמיתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, וחיי אמיתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו, בשמי מהרמך כתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, ולא כל הארץ כבודו, למען ברוך יאמרו. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו, דברי קודשך כתוב לאמור. ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם ועד כי מלך גדול, וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. אתה אחד ושמך אחד, ומי כעמך ישראל, מי כעמך ישראל, כאחד בארץ, תפארת גדולה ותרת ישועה, יום מנוחה וקדושה לעמך נתת, יום מנוחה וקדושה לעמך נתת. אברהם יגל, יצחק ירנן, יעקב לבניו ינוחו בו, מנוחת עבד נבן, מנוחת אמת ואמונה, מנוחת שלום ושלווה ושקט ובטח, מנוחת שלמה שאתה רוצה בך, יכירו בניך ויראו כי מידך כי מנוחתם, ויום מנוחתם יקדישו את שמך, אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, רצה ממנוחתנו, קדשנו במצוותיך, ותן חלקנו בתורתך, שמחנו מטובך, ושמחנו בישועתך, וטהר ליבנו לעבדך באמת, ונחילנו אדוני אלוהינו, באהבה ורצון שבת קודשך, וינוחו בך ישראל, וקדשי שמך ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת. רצה אדוני אלוהינו במחיוס ולוי תפילתם, וישבת עבודה לבירתך, ותפילתם באהבת שקבל ברצון, ותהי לרצון תמיד עבודת ישראל עמך, ותחז עינינו בשובך לציון ברחמים, ברוך אתה אדוני, המחזיר שכינתו לציון, מודים אנחנו לך שאתה אדוני. הטוב כי לא חדלו רחמיך, רחמכם כי לא תמו חסדיך, מעולם קיווינו לך, והכולם יברך ותרומם שמך מלכנו תמיד לעולם להד, בכל החיים ידעוך סלע, והללו את שמך באמת, האל ישועתנו ועזרתנו סלע, ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך וחנאי להודות, שלום רב על ישראל עמך, ועל כל יושבי תבל, תשים לעולם, כי אתה הוא מלך אדון לכל השלום, וטוב בעיניך, לברך את עמך ישראל, בכל עת וחושע בשלומך, ברוך אתה אדוני, הברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. תזכרך צדק לעולם, ותורתך. Is there tzidkach today? Erev Rosh Chodesh. Erev Rosh Chodesh, I think we're okay. tzidkach tzedek le'olam, v'torach emev, tzidkach Elohim ha'marom, asher asita gedolot Elohim michamocha, tzidkach v'karehem, mishpatecha tehom rabah, adam v'emar, toshia Adonai. You know, this reminds me, before I go into Kaddish Shalom, I'll just say really quickly, it's weird to turn around and not have amplification for the people on Zoom.
that I was just meeting with a publisher this week from the Rabbinical Assembly. We were talking about what his life had been before he came to be a publisher, and he said he published the first Zionist luach for Orthodox Jews in America. That was his job. For many, many years, because every other luach for the mainstream Orthodox movement in America did not acknowledge the existence of Israel. And of course, that also adds to significant changes in the liturgy if you take into account Israel. And so he was busy doing all of this. And he told me that he'd come across a Hungarian Rav who said that all the things like Tachanun and Male that we skip in Nisan, the month that begins our anticipation of the holiday of Pesach, 14 days in, he would move back to the beginning of whatever Adar that year, because that's the beginning of Geula. That's the beginning of redemption. I really like that. Not that I'm going to adopt a random, I guess, chumrah, a random stringency that we wouldn't say it based on one singular Rav. It's not necessarily my inheritance, but I think it's really nice that there's still some thought. It's nice to remember what the thought is behind our putting in prayers like this, because otherwise we don't necessarily stop to acknowledge them. Why is it that we stop here? Well, because in our community, we have the tradition that we don't do it at this time. How nice to be thinking already in Adar of this idea of redemption. It's not that we all wait all the way until we're panicked for Pesach, until we get there. So I've been thinking about that anyway this week. Plus tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh, but we'll get there when we get to Mariv. So we have Kaddish Shalom. We're on page 230. Ikadav ikadash mirapah vilma divrach yurtivim lichol kutei b'chayikon uvilechon uchayiduchol beit Yisrael bagalav isman kariv imru amen yehi shemi rabab mivarach le'olam u'le'om haya yitbarach v'shabach v'bar v'jama v'tnaseh v'tadar v'talei v'talal shemei dekudesha v'rich u'lehi lamin kol berchata v'shirata jishbechata v'nechmata tamiram be'alma v'imru amen tichabat salat orujon dekol Yisrael kadam avuhon divishmaya v'imru amen ish lamarab amin shemaya v'chalim halenu v'elkol Yisrael v'imru amen Osei shalom b'imromav u'yaseh shalom halenu v'elkol Yisrael v'imru amen. Alenu's on 231. Alenu l'shabehach l'adon hakol. Let's take it 11. אנחנו קוראים. Hakatu b'toratech Adonai himloch le'olam v'ahed v'nehemar v'hayad Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz b'yom hahu yehi Adonai echad u'shmo echad. Mourners Kaddish is on page 232. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei rabah b'yalma difra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon u'vyomechon u'chayei techol beit Yisrael v'agala u'bizman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shemei rabah mevarach le'olam u'lamei amaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitraman v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha b'richu le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim alenu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'imromav hu yaseh shalom alenu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Yesher koach to Marshall for chanting for us, and thank you to everybody else who participated in the service. We're going to take a moment to go and get some nourishment, some nosh, go get some food and drink. I'll add that the booklets were already going to be long enough. You'll see why, because I have some extensive commentary to share this week, which means I didn't print the actual pieces from our parsha that I'm running us through the commentary on. So I recommend you grab an Eitz Chaim and then you can follow along. You don't have to, but if you get a chumash, then you can follow along also with the psukim, the verses that I'm looking at the commentary on. So I'll say the verses either way, but if you'd like to follow along with the actual story, grab that. I'll hand out the commentary after we get some food. Okay, let's get some.
Well,
Yeah, I
population of Georgia. So churches, they want a good life, they want a good life without doing something about it.
Okay, I like that, yeah, I like that.
You know, we can't change it, but this country fall apart. All the population, big favors to the Western world. All the republic, former Soviet Union, and not all Western world have to support and development of the country that's bigger. And somebody's problem makes more worse. Somebody embrace it just because they decide to succeed or become independent.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Well, there's any particular reason?
No, just obviously actual. Just thinking about, the hot spots in the world.
Oh gosh, there's one hotspot.
Well,
Everything else I don't care.
well,
I'm sorry. Nobody cares about us, so.
well,
You don't know
I follow it, no, of course I follow it very, very closely.
No, every day, what I see is going on. It's insane, now we're building a bridge.
There's gonna be nothing but the Hamas.
Yeah, exactly.
Already, the airdrop there.
They were reported killed 5 people, because people ran toward the, yeah, it's,
That's the,
Do you want anything?
that's a track.
well, everything is tragic over there. It's tragic what's going on here. Look what's going on here, it's insane. United States, Hamas forces running around openly. Walking Pennsylvania Avenue. To make a speech.
They don't know what they're doing.
They know exactly what they're doing.
They are so inconsequential.
You know what? They
Except,
already
except,
tasted.
except in Michigan.
Don't be
Except
so.
in Michigan.
Thank you for catching
Look,
me.
Berkeley University.
Harash.
Harash.
So what's going on?
It does change the meaning, sorry.
Yeah.
It's California.
Thank you.
Hey, a plow person.
I'm glad you had in extra devices to help with
Yeah,
hearing
that
them.
was good. I was thinking of making at least one mistake and I already.
You have to make sure you're not robotic about it, that's true.
Right, yeah. I was gonna say accroché, that's thinker.
The name of the statue in Hebrew.
Yeah, so, I have to say, a computer is machshe, and a computer, program is
I thought it was like you're right.
You know, in Jacob's design, didn't support cancellation of the whole stage, literally, hands on. So the beautiful voice, but Stephen was poor, very, very poor. And so he made reference to Zadine, and he pronounced it Zateen, olives.
Olives 18. And as for those olives,
Quite funny, quite distressing.
and never again did it happen that there was a Kazan who pronounced Hebrew poorly. Just kidding.
Well, he kept on zapping, and but yeah, he was the only one in the room.
The classic mistake is Tirtzach B'mayim.
Is classic. I think my favorite regular mistake is by heaping soa aharon. By far, that's the funniest, right? And it was in the midbar, in the wilderness, they would lift up the aron as they went from place to place. But instead, most of my students will say by heaping soa aharon, and it was when they lifted up Aaron as they went.
Rabbi Tony, I will trump you on that.
Okay.
I was teaching a class of adults. The famous 1967 Chaim Hefer got to the wall poem about paratroopers, and I managed to confuse the words tzamchanim and tzimchanim. So turns out the vegetarians cry, which may also be true. That's my best Hebrew.
Another mistake he's making towards who versus he because of the Vav.
Constantly, yeah.
That's just not fair.
Right, that's an easy to make one, right?
No, I literally had a student.
Tirtzach B'mayim means instead of wash with water, it means murder with water.
Yep.
Like, it's very different.
You like to drown them.
Yes, Esh and Isha is also my favorite.
Yeah.
That's when you're sacrificing Isha and I.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's the chick. We're not cannibals.
Just get that right.
Yeah.
That's also one way you have to pronounce the Malki very famously, Isha Grusha Me Isha.
Oh, you're right. There's no water. We need water. If anybody catches Swan, there's a fountain right there. But if anyone sees Swan walking by, can you wave at him and we'll get some
It's a different party.
cold water. We have hot water. We might have coming, but not there.
Well, look at a half ahead.
Yeah, where's Miriam?
Exactly.
All right, we'll start in, 2 minutes. We're running nice and quickly.
I went to Jewish day school, getting some of that stuff.
For those who were here this morning, I made a comment on the morning's parsha of Betzalel being detail oriented.
Yeah.
And this X account I found, that may have been on the opposite spectrum because of that. A lot of us are detail oriented more so than others.
I would put Betzalel high on my list of characters in the Torah. Most likely could have been.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Me too because of that.
We had 1,000 workers.
Diagnosis that we recognized today. Exactly. Yeah, not flaws, but diagnosis. Sunny's
Rangers, tomato workers, about 80 nursery workers in San Diego.
I'm glad crazy and positive, we're all good at something.
A huge nursery workers. We'll see. We're negotiating.
That's the packets down.
I don't know who I'm talking to. This is the other guy who's trying to help. We got back to 50. You want to know this big race? I have no problem paying more for food. I know, but we gotta get the. Right. Right. Raise food prices. One of the. There are stories about them running back and forth.
Although they're not finishing. Sally's finishing. It's great. That's a little nuts.
Yeah.
How are you guys?
Good, very good. You know, that, Yoni and my granddaughter Noah are pretty close.
Yeah. Interesting.
Okay, I think we're ready to start. If you have a some sort of a chumash in front of you, some sort of a copy of the Hebrew Bible, in the Eitz Chaim specifically, we're on page 568. We're in the 39th chapter of Exodus. And I want to preview something from next weekend. Next Shabbat morning, during Hama'alot, the theme of the morning is what it means for an ending to actually be a beginning, a commencement. We come to the end of something, and the end of anything is actually the beginning of something new, a new stage, a new phase, moving on, but moving on means closing the last chapter. In anticipation of that, I was looking at the notion of what it meant to actually be finished, though. Before we move on to the idea that finishing is only the beginning, I wanted to think about that idea of the satisfaction, the gratification that comes from having completed a task. And in this coming week's Torah portion, we have a moment in which we see leadership and the people experiencing a moment of true acknowledgement of an end. And it's a moment of acknowledgement that it's the end. This is the end of something. And it's not only the end, it's a praiseworthy end. So we're on 568, chapter 39. And yet again, for about the third time in Parshat Pekudei, we see an entire list of everything that's been done to complete the work of the tent of meeting. And we get to verse 43. I'll back up to verse 42 for a moment. Kechol asher tziva Adonai et Moshe, and as for all that was commanded by God to Moses, Cain asu b'nei Yisrael, thus did the children of Israel, et kol ha'avodah. The grammar is worth picking apart, but we don't have time for that today. That is, they did all of the work. Exactly as God commanded Moses to have them do, they did it. Followed by, in verse 43, Vayar Moshe, and Moses saw, et kol hamlacha, all of the malacha, which in contemporary Jewish practice, we usually use to refer to what? What's malacha? Close. Work, handiwork. And why do we know from malacha? We aren't building a tabernacle. What malacha is a category of prohibited practice. When are we prohibited from doing malacha? Shabbat, Chag, and we're studying Moed Katan right now among the rabbinic team, the clergy team, in order to be done with it for the Siyum. And even the Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days of the festival, was a time where we examined what malacha could and couldn't be done. What is malacha not? Malacha is not work that makes you sweat, stuff that you do that you would personally call work. Malacha, rather, are categories of action that we eventually, through the rabbinic tradition, had as prohibitions because this was, in fact, a work that would have been done to complete the tabernacle. So if it was in the list of the workload that one would have done to complete the tabernacle, then it becomes a part of this category of forbidden action. Oh, that's spun out a little bit, yeah. Steve.
Also, the list that's right here from verse 33 to 41 is 39.
Correct. This is the section on which we base all of the 39 of
I'm saying the list of things in the Mishkan.
Oh, it happens to be 39?
Well, if you count verse 41 as one thing.
Oh, I like that.
Yes.
Yeah. It is, but it is in fact a great description of many of the av malachot, many of the general categories, we'll call them, the general categories of prohibited action. That's cool. I like the 39 things. So there are 39 of these prohibited categories. All you need to know is that this is the work that the Israelites did right now in the context of this, in the plain meaning of this text. The Israelites have done the work as it was commanded to them. Vayar Moshe et kol hamlacha, and Moses saw all of this malacha, all of these tasks that were done. Vehine asu ota ka'asher tziva Adonai, a repetition of what the narrator said the verse before. The narrator said, hey, the Israelites did all of the stuff that God told Moses they should do. And then in verse 43, and Moses saw that the Israelites did all the work exactly as God had commanded it to them. Cain asu, they had done it. And these last three words are what we're going to focus on for our learning. Vayivarech otam Moshe. What did God do? Moses. What did Moses do? What did God do? We don't know what God did in this verse. What did Moses do? He blessed them. Great. We're going to, usually on my source sheets, I try my best to go in the chronological order of the commentaries, but I'm not interested in that today, so I'm not doing that. I'm looking at different questions, and the first question that I have comes from the Orach Chaim, and I want to look at two. We're going to skip over one. We only have so much time. So we're going to look at number 2. This is on this part of the verse. The previous commentaries on the previous part of this verse 43. Vayivarech otam Moshe. The reason that the Torah wrote the name Moshe, Moses, instead of simply he blessed them, right? The verse invokes the name of Moses, is to teach us not to take this blessing lightly. To drill down on this commentary, which I believe is 18th century, to drill down on this commentary a little bit, the notion here isn't just that Moses is mentioned by name, but which part of the verse Moses is mentioned in. Moses is mentioned right here at the end of the verse. Vayivarech otam Moshe. Ends with the emphasis, and he blessed them, that is Moses. And that's how we end this portion of the story that eventually became a chapter division. So it's something very special, says the Or HaChaim, to be blessed by a man of God such as Moshe. If the people had been blessed by someone of lesser stature, the Torah would not have recorded this as something we have to know so many thousands of years later. And also normally, the Torah could have written what? Moshe Beirach Otam, or who Beirach Otam. Moshe blessed them, as in the we don't have a past or a future tense, but rather in the non-generative, the point being that we could have moved Moshe's name to the beginning of this phrase, not just the beginning of this sentence. But by placing the name Moshe at the end of the line, the Torah taught us the significance of being blessed by someone of Moshe's standing. So if you pick this apart in plainer English, what this means is, it's one thing to say their teacher praised them. And it's another thing to say they were praised greatly. By whom? The teacher herself. Right? To end with the one who is doing the subject is to emphasize what? What's so special about that? I agree with the take on the commentary, but what is so special about being blessed by a particular person? How does it feel different to be blessed by a Moshe rather than just anyone?
He's referred to as Ish. He's referred to as Ish Elohim. He's a man of God. So he in effect is conveying the messages to the people.
Okay, so as Marshall says, Moshe is a man of God, and so he's conveying the messages of the people, so he has a certain standing. His praise has a certain standing. Yeah, Bob.
It says that Moshe observed that they had done. So this is like indicating his response to what he observed. So I don't see it as that. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but it's not that. There's more to it. He saw what they did.
Right. He saw what they did, and we're going to get to the meaning of Vaya'ar for now, but I will still read back into what you're saying, that Moshe was one who saw what they did. It's one thing to have someone say, hey, I heard that program last week went really nicely, versus someone who said, you know, I'm so glad I came to that program. It was wonderful. Right. So you're right, actually, if you don't mind my reading your commentary about the Vayar into the verse, it's true that there's something to the fact that it was the person observing the labor who comes and says, wow, bless you. This was amazing. This is amazing. Go ahead. Any other takes on why it's so special to have somebody? Moshe liberated them. So it's the figure whom he is to the Israelites. Right? He's the one who took them out of Egypt. Even though it's the hand of God, Moshe is the one who's leading the charge. And now they've done a task as a team, ostensibly as a people. And he's saying, blessing Otam. So I'm going to read your commentary back into the verse. He blessed them. That is Moshe. And what was he blessing? He blessed them. Right? We're not going to actually go anywhere like in that direction in this commentary today. But there's something to be said about the fact that Moshe blessed them as a people in this moment. He liberated them, but he liberated a kind of a mishmash of fleeing, people who are fleeing from a life of slavery. It was just a whole mixed bag of people, and a mixed multitude along with them. And now he's blessing them and blessing them as a people. Good. Okay, so I think this answers the question, why is this blessing so special? I'm doing this Jeopardy style, so backwards, that's the question I'm inventing. And the answer is, it's a special blessing and it's a special moment of conclusion because Moses is the one to come and offer the blessing in that moment. I'll add my own commentary to it, which is to say twice in 42 and 43, we are told specifically that the people did the work as God commanded Moses to have them do. And there's something about your work being examined and said, and someone saying, thank you not only for doing it, but really doing it as I asked. And by the way, as I asked, being the one organizing a task or God organizing the task, is very different than thanks for doing it well. Thanks for doing it to the best of your abilities. This is something else. Thanks for doing it just like God asked. Moshe is the inspector in that regard, and they're getting a passing grade on their inspection. Yeah.
It also sets the continuity from God to Moses to the people.
Great. And it also preserves the continuity of this line. God commands Moses. Moses oversees the work. Vayar, he sees it, and then he blesses them on having completed it. Great. So it preserves that chain of supervision from God. We're going to skip over the latter part of the Orach Chaim. You can read this commentary on your own time, but we're going to move on to Rashi. And by moving on, I mean moving backwards in time. Sorry, but I wanted to ask a different question next. When we get into this commentary, again, 11th through 13th centuries, because obviously Rashi was approximately 220 years old by the time Rashi was. We can talk about that another time. We'll say the school of Rashi. The school of Rashi says something about, well, what exactly, I'm going to, again, jeopardy us. What exactly was the blessing that Moshe gave them? Now, the text, the Orach Chaim points out, how cool is it that the text wants us to know exactly who offered a blessing in that moment, wants us to know that Moshe came and blessed the people. But the blessing text isn't there. So Rashi asks the question, bless them how? Bless them with what? Bless them with words, with anointment, with hand placing. And if so, with words, then with what words? So Rashi says, he said to them, who's the he? Moshe says to the people. Okay, so he's quoting Moshe to us, even though it's not in the text. And he's taking this, as he often does, Rashi, from an old collection of Midrashim called the Sifra. So that anticipates Rashi by like 1,000 years. And he's pulling in this commentary, this notion that what he blessed them with is, I love that this is in the English, may it be the will of God that his Shekhinah rest upon the work of your hands, and let the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish thou the work of our hands upon us. That's from, it tells you right here, Psalm 90. But when do we do Psalm 90? It's a Shabbat psalm, one of the 11, and there are two places. Anyone know the closing lines of this? It's catchy. Right, Uma'aseyadenu konanehu, right? And so it comes from, nicely done, nicely retranslated back into our text. So when do we say this? In Pesukei de Zimra, on Shabbat and on Chag. So on our the days when we have an additional set of Psalms that we read to get ourselves ready for the day, we read on page 100, and sorry, I should have taken the page first. It's on page 129. Okay. And so read it out loud all together. Let's try it all together. Vihi Noam Adonai Eloheinu Aleinu. May the beauty of God rest upon us. Uma'aseh Yadenu Konena Aleinu. Uma'aseh Yadenu Konenehu. Great. So that's the translation of that's what we have here in the Rashi, the translation of that verse. So oftentimes our commentators want to give context to the Psalms. What I mean by that is they'll see a verse in the Psalms like Sarli Elohim or Uma'aseh Yadenu Konanehu, like the work of our hands is upon us. And they ask the question going backwards, what work? What was the psalmist referring to? I know what they were referring to. They must have been referring to this verse, or rather, this is the blessing that's inscribed here. Also, the little piska, these little phrases that come before each of the psalms that we read, each of the Tehillim in our Siddur, are not a part of the psalms themselves. They're assigned in very, very early rabbinic times. So if you look on page 129, you see that the introduction to the psalm is Tefillah LeMoshe Ish HaElohim. This is a prayer ascribed to Moses, who was a man of God. Going back to what you said, Marshall, right? Baruch Shekivanta. Blessed be that you thought of the same thing that Rashi said thousands of years ago. Oh, you didn't remember the name? Okay. No. That's okay. You can take the credit. Yeah, exactly. I'll also add one last little bit. On page 279, if you want to follow along in the Siddur, this verse also shows up at the end of Shabbat, and we're about to read it. That's why I want to point it out. Not that it has so much additional significance, but we are about to read it again. There's a little selection from Psalm 90. This selection exactly. And when is this? Where are we in the service on 279? We're at the very, very end. We're what we every service has an introductory portion to the service, a main portion of the service that may contain the Shema and an Amidah, always an Amidah, but also the Shema is in that middle portion. And then there's always an outro as well. The most minimal version of this is Mincha has Ashrei, and it ends with Aleinu. It's the smallest one. And the rabbis tell us in the Gemara, this is because, in the Mishnah, carried into the Gemara, that this is because people have to work and they've got stuff going on in the middle of the day. In Ma'ariv, we have an outro, and at the end of Shabbat, you can tell, we won't get too deeply into this, otherwise I'd be on another track, you can tell they're dragging their feet on ending Shabbat. Because the end of Ma'ariv is usually not this. In fact, it was actually forbidden at a certain point to have the Me'ain Sheva, to have that little additional mini repetition of the Amidah on Friday evenings, lest people be in danger as they walked home so late at night. Because evening is considered a dangerous time. It certainly was in ancient history. Despite that, we add words to our service here. We extend beyond what we need to do. It should, by all accounts, on page 279, our prayer should be Kaddish Shalem, Aleinu, Mourner's Kaddish, get home, it's dark, it's late, it's dangerous. But we don't, we extend, and we add this verse among a few other things. What is this verse? It's a specific selection from Psalm 90, and that the beauty of God is resting upon us, and that we pray that God establishes the work of our hands upon us. This is not, this would be a nice ending to the teaching. This is not the end of the teaching, but how nice to read back into this, that a wonderment about what work of our hands is being praised here. In other words, if there is an ancient understanding going back to the Sifra, that what these words are a blessing from Moses upon the ending of the building of the tabernacle, why are we saying this at the end of Shabbat, a time when we are prohibited from doing that kind of work? What is the malacha that's getting praised at this time? Perhaps it's even the menucha. It's actually the rest of Shabbat, not the rest of Shabbat, the rest that takes place on Shabbat that's being praised. That's not the end, but that would make a nice shiny ending. Maybe they'll cut the podcast off there, and that'll be the end of it. If and nothing else I say is interesting, right? Me too. Yeah. Thanks, Bert. You can, make this the end, and then I'll continue with maybe less poignant stuff. But I was feeling pretty good about that point because I'm fascinated by this extension. I'm fascinated by the idea that we extend evening services given the sense that Ma'ariv should not be extended. I want us to look at one more aspect of this blessing. And for this, we turn a little bit to Chassidut. We're going to look at a commentary called the Shnei Luchot HaBrit. This is a section that happens to comment on Parshat Truma,
which also deals in the making of the Mishkan. And I'm going to read it out loud, and I want you to ask the question. Well, I want you to see if you can jeopardy the question that I would ask about this. What's the question that the text is asking? What's the question this commentary is asking about this moment of Moses blessing the people upon finishing the Mishkan? Here we go. All of our sages, Kol HaChachamim, agree that the tabernacle was a microcosm of the macrocosm, that it reflected to the extent possible structures and concepts and their development prevalent in the high heavens, the celestial regions, though those structures and concepts are, of course, abstract. So in Midrash Rabbah Truma, again, a very old rabbinic commentary on Parshat Truma, which also deals in the making of the tabernacle, we hear a commentary on the section of Chronicles, yours, O Lord, our greatness, might, splendor, triumph, and majesty, yes, all that is in heaven and earth. This is what Rabbi Berechia says, and he sees this as proof that God transferred God's residence to the tabernacle. There's also a Midrash Tanchuma on Parshat Pekudei, that's us, which quotes from Psalms 26:8. O God on high, I love your temple abode, the dwelling place of your glory, as proof that the residence of God on earth corresponds to the one God has in the high heavens. In other words, God has a seat on a throne up in heaven, and also God has a seat in the Mishkan. Right? God has a place to be dwelling in the Mishkan. Its construction was also a repetition of the process of creation. So what's a repetition, or I'm going to translate this as a parallel to the act of creation? We're going to find out. Okay. This is derived from the text of Genesis 1:1. I think you know it. Bereshit bara Elohim is the beginning of the Torah. At the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And in Psalms 104:2, we read, you spread the heavens like a tent cloth. The tabernacle was also covered by tent cloth. As per Exodus 21:6, you shall make the tabernacle from 10 strips of tent cloth. So what's their trajectory? Bereshit 1 says God spreads it out like a tent. To Psalms, this verse that says that you spread the heavens like a tent cloth. And then the reasoning is, and when did we spread a tent cloth? When we made the Mishkan. Oh, that's what it referred to. When describing what happened on the second day of creation, the Torah speaks about a firmament, which is to separate the upper waters from the lower waters, giving instructions. Whereas when giving the instructions for building the tabernacle, the Torah directs that there should be a curtain that divides between the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies. So just as God separates the heavens from the earth, so that creates a firmament for that, also we have what in the Mishkan? What's similar in the Mishkan? The sanctuary and the Holy of Holies needs a parocha, needs a curtain to separate between the two of them, just like the firmament that we learned about early in the Torah. The Torah, relating the work God performed on the third day of creation, mentions that the waters are to be gathered in one area. So all the waters on earth were gathered into one place. Whereas during the construction of the tabernacle, the Torah commands the construction of a copper basin into which all the water is to be poured. Our bat mitzvah today spoke beautifully about the power of women and their supposed contribution to the Mishkan by having given of their implements that would then later be turned into a copper basin in the tabernacle. So this text, this midrash, sees a comparison between the ingathering of the waters that existed in the earliest version of the earth by God and the idea of collecting all the water in a basin in the Mishkan. On the fourth day of creation, the Torah reports the construction of the great luminaries. What are those? The sun and the moon, the big lights up in the sky that are sometimes there. Whereas the Torah commands the construction of what? What's the comparison? Yeah, you have to have a menorah. It's part of the furnishings. So you also have to create lights there. On the fifth day of creation, God created the birds. I can't wait to see what they think are like birds, right? Whereas in the tabernacle, the Torah commands that what should be on the lid of the Holy Ark? There should be cherubim who are kruvim, whose
body types include wings. Okay, and in addition to that, they said also we offer up the sacrifices of birds. So maybe that's more of a direct, a devar acher. That might be another way of looking at it. We also offered up sacrifices of birds. Okay, like if you weren't buying the cherub bit, right? Like if that's not satisfying, if you don't buy the whole cherubs with wings parallel the birds, you might like the notion that there were sacrifices of birds offered there. On the sixth day of creation, God created humankind in God's own image to reflect the glory of that human being's creator. Whereas in the tabernacle, a human being, the high priest, was to be anointed and consecrated to parallel in this microcosm the function of man in the macrocosm in this microcosm. So what is it that we did that's parallel to God creating humankind? What did we make? God created humankind, and what did we make according to this? We made a priest. We made a Kohen Gadol. According to this read, we created a Kohen Gadol. We did that as a people. This is like God creating humankind. We were the ones who anointed. God didn't make the high priest. God said who was going to be the high priest, but we anointed the high priest. We made that happen. And then on the seventh day of creation, the universe is described as having been completed. And we find a similar expression when the Torah describes the construction of the tabernacle as having been completed. When the universe was completed, God blessed it. Whereas when the tabernacle was completed, Moses blessed it. Vayar Elohim, Bob pointed it out earlier. What's the Vayar Elohim? Vayar Moshe, he pointed out earlier. I gave it away. What is that parallel to? Vayar? Exactly. Vayar Elohim, and God saw all that God made, and it was tov. It was good. This Midrash says that the blessing that Moshe was saying was, this is good. Just like God looked back at the end of creation on Shabbat and said, all that I made was great, so too does Moshe, in parallel to all of that creative activity, come to say, look what you did. It's tov, right? Or maybe even tov me'od. But those aren't the words that Moses uses. Instead, we have this idea from the Sifra that we're praising the work of people's hands, because of course it's people making this, not God. Skip over the next bit, and I want to read two last things, and we'll close. In the middle of page that's not numbered, that has the bolded text in the middle of it that says Parker Palmer, The Active Life, a Spirituality of Work, Creativity, and Caring. I want to read this paragraph in the middle. But for me, and for many people that I know, these ordinary activities, work, creativity, caring, contain an extraordinary mix of blessing and curse. The blessing is obvious, especially when we lose the chance or capacity to do these ordinary things. The active life makes it possible for us to discover ourselves and our world, to rest and extend our powers to connect with other beings, to co-create a common reality. The joys of action are known to everyone who has done a job well, made something of beauty, given time and energy to a just cause. Take away the opportunity to work, to create, or to care, as our society does to too many people, and you have deprived someone of a chance to feel fully human. In other words, the opportunity to do work is the blessing in and of itself. There is a beautiful notion here that I'm going to have us back up and read one last text in a moment about. It's a commentary on the story of Jacob wrestling with the angels. The idea here is that work is not just its own reward, the opportunity to do work. Not that God came and created, but carrying on from that story, God knew that the next level needed on this earth was that people had an opportunity to build these things themselves, to anoint the priest, to make the tabernacle theirs. And that's the thing that's being praised, the work of human beings' hands. That's the connection back to the psalm. The praise is over the fact that human beings did as God asked, and the fact that they did it with their hands and that it was a labor of love. A commentary on the story of Jacob who wrestled with the angels. We're going to read from the top of that same page, the same page with Parker Palmer. Having found himself, Jacob is called to found a nation. Jacob's story is a reminder to us to not only recognize our successes, but also celebrate the new challenges that arise from those successes. The reward for a job well done, after all, is another job. May we merit success in the works of our lives and use those achievements to inspire us to even greater heights. So I guess that was a little bit too much of a teaser, because the truth is, even this commentary, and I think all the commentaries are kind of driving to the same point, say that the real blessing of this work is now the real work can begin. And not only that, but that the Jewish people, Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, in that moment in our parsha, have found favor in God's eyes by the works of their hands. And now, just as once Jacob was given the name Yisrael, that wasn't the end of his story, but rather the beginning of the lineage of the Israelite people, so too is the reward, the blessing here, the approval to move on to the next place. So I end here in a little bit of tension. And the tension is that when we have work that's really well done in our lives, and we especially have that work praised by the people who might be most responsible for seeing to that work being praiseworthy, that is in and of itself a blessing. But the blessing can't stagnate there. The point of blessed work is that you've proven that you've earned the next thing. I think every one of us has been in a position where we rightly feel gratification and rightly feel satisfaction about the job that we've done. And it's the ability to turn that gratification and satisfaction to a sense of readiness after we breathe, after we Shabbat, after we have our Menucha, to accept that the blessing is that since we've done a job well, that the very people who asked us to do that job would like to see more from us. And in that case, it is macrocosmic. It is the story of the Jewish people. And again, finding favor in God's eyes and being able to continue the work. It's not in building a tabernacle. It's in practicing human decency according to the rules of Torah, Halacha, the Jewish people. Thank you for studying this with me. Shabbat Shalom. And we'll get back to this text of Psalm 90 in just a few minutes. But first, I need somebody who ate bread to lead us in some Shir Hamalot and the beginning of benching. You know, any bread eaters? No? There might actually, hang on. Who ate, this is a weird confessional. Did many people eat bread? Because if not, okay, we'll take a minute to bench quietly. It seems like we skipped the bagels today. So, right. So go ahead and we'll leave time to say Birkat Hamazon, but for people who didn't have, then we'll just have a moment to clear our places and get ready in the Siddur. So we'll meet back at Mariv in just a few moments. Yeah. We're doing it's personal because we don't have enough people who've had bread, so you can do it at your own pace. In just a moment, we'll be at Mariv. We're on page 264. So go ahead and get your Sidurim ready. Okay, when you're ready, I invite you to rise for weekday Mariv. Begins on page 264. והוא רחום יחבר בו ולא ישחית, וירבה להשיבה פה ולא יראה כל חמתו. אדוני הושיע המלך יעננו ויום קוראנו, ברכו את אדוני המבורך. Baruch Adonai המבורך לעולם ועד. Baruch atah Adonai. We can be seated. מעביר יום ומביא לילה, מבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו אל חי וקיים תמיד, ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני המריב הרבים. אהבת ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו Adonai Echad. Adonai Elohechem Emet. V'mna kuzol v'kayev aleinu ki hu Adonai Eloheinu v'yintil atova. מלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה בני ישראל לכנו שירה ושמחה רבה ויאמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות אוסיף אלה מלכותך בראו ופניך בוקיים לפני משה זה עלינו ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב ויהיה מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גא ישראל. השיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום. לשמור את צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ושלום את אהבי העולם ברוך אתה אדוני שומר עמו ישראל לעד. Page 268. כי המלכות שלך היא ולא מיד תמלוך בכבוד כי לנו מלך אלא אתה ברוך אתה אדוני המלך בכבודו תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד ועל כל מעשיו יקדש ויקדש שמי רבה נלמד דברי קראתי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ובמלכונך לכל בית ישראל בגלה בזמן קריב אמרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעמיה יפרח וישתבח יתבר ויתשמע ויתנשא, יתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי לקודשה בריחו לילה. מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תשוחתה ונחמתה, דמירם בעלמה ואמרו אמן. The whispered private Amidah begins on 270. Oh, thank you. There is an addition because tonight we start the new month of Adar Bet, which means that we should add in the special paragraph of praise and thanksgiving for Rosh Chodesh, for a new month. You can find that in the middle of page 277, I believe. Yes, 277. If you haven't yet completed your own Amidah, please continue at your own pace. We're in the middle of 279. יתכתב יקדש מרבה, מלמד יברח הרטיב ימליך ומוטה בחייכון וימכון וחית וכל בית ישראל. בגלף בזמן קריב אמרו אמן, יהי שמי רבה ופרח לעולם ולמהליה. יפרח וישבח ויפר וישמע ויתנשא, ויתדר ויתעלה ויתעלל שמי לקודשה. מריח ולעילה, מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה, תמיד רמל ואמרו amen. You can be seated, middle of 279, those verses of the Psalms we were just studying. Vihi noam Adonai Eloheinu aleinu, u'maseyatenu konen aleinu, u'maseyadenu konenehu. Yoshev b'sei Charlie. Yikreni v'nehu imonochi v'tzarach al-tzehu v'yachledehu orech yamim asviyehu v'erehu b'shuati orech yamim asviyehu V'yarehu b'yeshuati. You turn back to page 216. Second tiny paragraph on the page. V'yata kadosh shefti lot Yisrael v'kar zel zel ve'hamar kadosh 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 Adonai tzvot meloch haaretz kevoto kalim. Atisein ruach v'shmachar kol rahash gadol baruch kevod Adonai mimekomon. Adonai himloch le'olam va'ed. Yivtechu b'cha yudei shemecha ki lo azavta doreshecha Adonai. Adonai chavetz lanzi koyek til Torah ve'yatir. Turn back in the Sidurim, backboard, to page 280 for Kaddish Shalom. Yikadav yikadash mirabam yamad yivrach yirtim yamlich machutim v'chaychon v'yamechon v'chayit u'chubeis Yisrael v'agalah v'zman karivim ru'amein ish mirabam v'rach li'alam u'mei homaya yitbarach v'ishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitama v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalal shmei nekudesha b'rich u'leidla min kol berchata v'shirata tushvachata v'nechamata damiram b'yamavim ru'amein chitkabal tzalot orutam d'chol Yisrael kadama b'honi v'yishmai havim ru'amein ish lamarabam in shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'yol kol Yisrael v'im ru'amein Yosei shalom b'mramah hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'yol kol Yisrael v'im ru'amein Aleinu 281 Aleinu l'shabehach l'adon hakol. Kagatu b'torah Adonai himloch le'lam v'hivnei mar v'haya Adonai l'melech kol haaretz v'yom hahui Adonai echad u'shmo echad. Just mention that as soon as we finish with Havdalah here tonight, I'll be going over to the home of the Chermiskys, where Ed is sitting shiva for his brother, a life cut way too short. So if you feel that you have time to do so this weekend, there are a couple opportunities tonight and also tomorrow evening to be at the home of the Chermiskys to offer them comfort. It's not a formal service, but rather a sitting of Shiva, welcoming people to come and offer words and presence and comfort. All those who are in a cycle of mourning, turn to Mourner's Kaddish. We're on page 282. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba be'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon v'yomechon u'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael ba'agala v'zman kari v'imru amen yehi shemei rabba mevarach le'alam u'lamei amaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudsha b'richu La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata damiram be'alma v'imru amen Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen Osei shalom b'marav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Yasher koach to everybody who participated in the learning today. Whoa, that was loud. I want to offer one critical reminder. Turn your clocks forward tonight. Don't forget. Hey, Rana. Shavua Tov. Don't forget, which means that even though tonight is the night, turn it over. The most.
iPhone do it automatically, or cable box does the clock on. I've seen it. It's pretty cool.
Hey, Rana. Do you have any matches or a lighty thingy, please? Do you know anybody who does? Okay, great. That'd be good. I just noticed that we don't have. Okay, this is why I was making that announcement, though. I mean, in general, I think it's for your well-being that you are reminded to turn your clocks forward. In addition to that, welcome to 2 days of Rosh Chodesh, Chodesh Tov. It's the beginning of Adar Bet. Normally, we begin services earlier when it's Rosh Chodesh. However, on Sunday mornings, we keep it at 8 a.m. Your body's going to feel like it's 7 a.m., but please be here if at all possible. The following morning, Monday morning, for the second day of Rosh Chodesh, services begin at 7:15 in the morning. Got it? So tomorrow at 8 a.m., but make sure you turn your clocks so that we have a minyan here for Rosh Chodesh, please. And then the following day at 7:15. And it sounds like Juan's bringing us light Yeah, exactly. It's light to light. So we can start with Lohine. Yes, Mike is genuinely worried about making a minion tomorrow. I think that's warranted. So please, get out of. If you can make it out of bed, then come. Or if you have early morning gym time, come after. Okay. Hine el Yeshuati, etach velo echad. Ki ozi v'zimerat Adonai vayhi li lishua. Pushat hamayim b'sason, v'yimanei Yeshua. Adonai Yeshua. Elam ha'vichatecha sela. Adonai Tzivaot Himanu Miskav Lainu Elohei Yaakov Salah Adonai Tzivaot Asher Yadam Moteach Bach Adonai Yoshia Hamelech Yaneinu Yom Koreinu La Yehudim Hai Torah V'simcha v'sason Mikar Kain Tiyeh Lanu Kosi Yeshuot Esa Hu V'shem Adonai Ekra Yainenai 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 Savri Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei pri hagafen Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei minei besamim Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei miorei ha'esh Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lecho ben or lechoshech ben Yisrael ha'amim ben yom ha'shvi'i l'shesh yemei ha'maseh Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lecho. Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov. Eliyahu hanavi, Eliyahu hatishvi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu agilati, bimhira ve'yaveinu, Yahava Eleinu, Imashiach ben David, Imashiach ben David. Shavua tov, Chodesh tov. See you all soon.
Thank you very much for the wonderful service and Shavua Tov from Toronto.
Shavuot Tov.
What? Table. Oh, sorry, title. Wrong one. Table. Sorry. Yeah, we missed you. We missed you on Thursday. Thursday evening.